What's up, guys? Welcome back to King Kraken Sports. Mike here. Earlier today, we talked about the AFC North draft grades. Right now, we're going to talk about the NFC North. If you guys have missed any of the previous videos, links will be down below. Again, quick refresher on the rules. These are based off of where I had them on my board, as well as perceived scheme, fit, value, everything like that. If a player was not on my board due to the fact I don't have time to scout 500 players every year, I thought I did a decent job this year doing 268, which was a little bit lower than my 290 from last year. So it's bound to happen that guys are going to get picked that aren't on my board or that I just don't have time to get around to. I generally give them a C unless there is a special consideration. There will be one of those in this, video, so watch out for those. But yeah, I mean, if I don't, the reason for it being a C is because I can't make enough of a judgment for it to be whether or not it's a good pick or not a good pick, just because I may not have actually been able to watch that player whatsoever. So let's get into it. Chicago Bears had the number 8 overall pick. They had the worst record in the division, so we'll start with them. They got Roquan Smith, the linebacker out of Georgia. He was my number 6 overall player. After Bradley Chubb, the best defensive prospect in this class. Just an absolute freak. Great player, going to turn around that defense quite a bit. I was really happy that this was the pick. With the way that the board fell, with there being the quarterbacks taken at the top, meant that Chicago was able to get a great value pick for themselves here. 8, I gave it an A+. It was just such a great pick. Bears come at it again in round 2. They get James Daniels, the center out of Iowa, who was my number 27 overall pick. Great pickup. Listen, Hronis Grasu is not that great. I think that this allows Cody Whitehair to move to left guard and then have Kyle Long at right guard, solidify 3 positions with 1 pick. This was great. I gave it an A. Anthony Miller was the pick later in round 2. They traded, I believe, up from round 3, into kind of mid-round 2 to get him. I had him as my 93rd overall player. There were a lot of people who thought he was like Antonio Brown and top 30 player on the board. I didn't really see it with him. I thought he was an okay player. I just didn't think that. I thought that the media, as well as a lot of draft Twitter, overhyped him. I gave it a B+. Mitch Trubisky needs some weapons to throw to, and getting a wide receiver at any point really does help him with that. Round 4, I'm hoping I can pronounce this name correctly. Joel Iyiegbuniwe, probably butchered that, from Western Kentucky, the linebacker. Not someone I was able to scout. I tried to get some tape on, to find some tape on him. Couldn't find any. Gave it a C just because, again, wasn't on my board. Bilal Nichols, the defensive tackle out of Delaware State, same thing. Couldn't watch him at all. Couldn't find any tape on him. So I gave it a C as well because, again, can't make a proper judgment call on a player I've never seen. Kylie Fitz at 181, the edge rusher out of Utah. He's got some injury concerns, and I wonder a little bit about the scheme fit. But I had him at 168 on the board. I gave him a B+. I wasn't sure about the scheme fit. I think for sure he's a special teamer, but I'm not really sure whether he's going to be a linebacker in the system or whether he's going to be a defensive end. Then their last pick, Javon Wims, the wide receiver out of Georgia, 224 overall. He was 218 on my board. Big-bodied receiver, which is something that Trubisky and the Bears need. I gave it an A. Really thought it was a great pick. So the Bears get A+, A, B+, C, C, B+, A. I gave them B+ overall. Solid draft, something for them to build on. Ryan Pace has done a pretty good job in his last couple of drafts. Next up, the Green Bay Packers. And man, the Packers without Ted Thompson in charge are a much differently operated team. The new GM was trading back, trading up, trading players, everything. Which was very un-Packers of them. In fact, they started at 14, traded back to 27, and then traded back up to 18 to get Jair Alexander, the corner out of Louisville. I gave this a B. If Jair Alexander had played as well as he did in his sophomore year as he did in his junior year, this would have been he would have been ranked higher, and this would have been a better pick. But I get it; he was coming off of the injury, battled injuries throughout the year. Again, another guy I thought that draft Twitter and a lot of the media overhyped. He was my number 5 corner. Just didn't really see A lot of value with that pick, especially when you trade back and then trade back up only a couple picks after you initially would have had the pick. Gave it a B. Now, my number 2 corner, they took at 45, and Josh Jackson doubled down on corners. I would have had no problem if they flipped the order, got Josh Jackson at 18 and Jair Alexander at 45. I gave the Josh Jackson pick an A+. I'm not really sure how Josh Jackson fell out of round 1. Round 3, let me try that again. Oren Burks, the linebacker out of Vanderbilt. I don't know how my tongue got twisted saying that. They got him at 88. He was someone I was desperately, like a week or two before the draft, I had started hearing a lot more buzz on him. Was going to try to watch some of his tape. Wasn't able to get any in time, and also things came up, and my time to watch tape really suffered. So he wasn't on my board. So I gave it a C. Again, wasn't able to watch enough to make a good judgment call. I'm not going to try to force anything. Jamon Moore at 133, the wide receiver out of Missouri, height, weight, speed guy. The Packers desperately needed some guys to help out that that aging wide receiving core. Jordy's not there anymore. Randall Cobb's getting older. Devontae Adams is probably their best receiver. Getting a guy for the future, I like the pick. He was 166 on my board. They got him at 133. I gave him a B+. Then they went on a string of guys that I had not seen before. Cole Madison, the offensive tackle out of Washington State, 138, wasn't on my board. Gave it a C. J.K. Scott, the punter out of Alabama, they got him at 172. Here's where the difference is for those special considerations. If a special teamer is drafted, I tend to give it just an A or whatever, because if you're drafting a special teamer, like a kicker, a punter, a long snapper, or something like that, generally means that there's a need, so it's probably a good pick. So J.K. Scott, regarded as the best punter in the class, they got him at 172. I don't scout punters. I'll take the media's word for it. I gave it an A. Marquez Valdez-Scantling from USF, 173, didn't know who he was, gave it a C. Equanimous St. Brown out of Notre Dame, draft Twitter's favorite son. Listen, there's a reason he was available at 207. I had him at 160 on my board. A lot of people really liked EQ St. Brown, but NFL teams described him as soft, a locker room cancer, looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. His teammates hate him, entitled, not good at football. What about this as a first-round player? Where draft Twitter was like drooling all over themselves as a top 20 player. NFL teams didn't see it. I didn't see it. This is more in around where he should have gone. I gave this an A. Then they went James Looney, defensive end out of my favorite university, the University of California, at 232. Now, I didn't think he was going to be drafted. I didn't even bother watching him, so he wasn't on my board. I had to give it a C. Then they went with a long snapper, Hunter Bradley. Again, if you're drafting a special teamer, probably means that it's a need. Gave it an A. And then Kendall Donnerson, don't know what university he was from, can't remember off the top of my head. 248, didn't know who he was, gave it a C. Overall, I gave Green Bay a B, because there are a lot of players that I don't know, so I can't give it a good judgment call. But adding it all up, it was more or less a decent draft, but not a great draft. Next up, Detroit Lions in Matt Patricia's first draft as a head coach. And you can tell that this is Matt Patricia wants to kind of change the identity of the Detroit Lions with his picks. First off, they go Frank Ragnow, the center out of Arkansas. Did not see this pick coming. Didn't think that Frank Ragnow was a first round pick. Good player. Battled some injuries, but I think even if he was healthy, he was like an early to mid day day 2 guy, like a round 2 guy. Didn't think the value was there at 20. Gave it a C+. Kerryon Johnson out of Auburn, the running back, taken at 43. Now again, thought that this was going to be Darius Geis, but Kerryon Johnson kind of I call him Baby Bell. He reminds me a lot of Le'Veon Bell, and in a lot of his play style and everything like that. Great player. Thought a lot of people on on Twitter and in the media. You never really heard a lot about Kerryon Johnson. He was my number 42 overall player. I would have been happier if they had gotten Kerryon Johnson at 20 than Frank Ragnow. If they had switched these picks again, this would have been a lot better in my mind, or if they had just gone with Darius Geis in round 1 and then Frank Ragnow later. But regardless, Kerryon Johnson, easily the best running back already on Detroit's roster. Now they actually have a bell cow, and now Matt Stafford won't have to throw it so much. Gave this pick an A. But Tracy Walker, the corner/safety out of Louisiana Lafayette, I didn't know who he was. Matt Miller from Bleacher Report, who was my most trusted source when it comes to draft info, said he was kind of like a 5th-round player. So getting him in round 3 didn't really make a lot of sense, especially when, again, there were really good safeties still on the board, such as Ronnie Harrison, Deshaun Elliott, those types of guys. Didn't really understand the pick. Gave it a C, just because, again, wasn't on my board. Can't make a judgment call. But when a 5th-round guy is being drafted in the 3rd round, there are some questions that need to be answered. Deshaun Hand, the defensive lineman, not really sure if he's a tackle or defensive end out of Alabama, just based off of his size. 114 overall. He was 123 on my board. Gave it an A. This is a rotation guy for that defensive line that's getting a little bit older. And you know what? Some of their guys are getting a little older. And you know what? Ashawn Robinson is there as well, so he's got another Alabama kid to play beside. Great rotational defensive lineman. Gave it an A. Had him at 123 on my board. Then I think that Detroit's best, possibly their best pick comes at 153. Tyrell Crosby. They announced him as a guard out of Oregon. Played tackle. I was really, really wondering why the fuck Tyrell Crosby was still there. I had him going somewhere around late, mid to late round 2. He was 61 on my board. They got him at 153. This is an A+. Day 1 starter. They're going to kick him into guard. They've got 2 bookend tackles. They needed improvement at guard. This was a great pick after missing a couple years ago on Laken Tomlinson. Nick Bodden, the fullback out of San Diego State. Didn't watch him because I don't tend to watch fullbacks all that much. But he was a good blocking fullback for the kid out of San Diego State, Rashad Penny. Decent player. Wasn't sure if he was going to get drafted. Also wasn't on my board. But because of the identity change that Detroit's obviously going with the center, the running back, get him a fullback, kind of introduce that power run game. I like the pick overall. I actually gave it a B+ because, again, the special consideration. Overall, I gave Detroit's draft a B+. Really solid draft for Matt Patricia in his first year. Then Minnesota, kind of an up-and-down draft in my opinion. So let's get into it. They start at pick 30 with Mike Hughes, the corner out of UCF. Off-field was his big thing, and the fact he was a one-year wonder. Started at North Carolina, was kicked off the team, went to a community college, then went to UCF and balled out. Talent-wise, he's great, but again, there is some off-field concerns as well. But Minnesota loves taking some of these off-field concern guys, and you know what? You stick them in Minnesota, where there's nothing sketchy going on in Minnesota, in the streets of Minneapolis. Great culture fit. I gave it an A-. Brian O'Neill, the tackle out of Pitt, was the pick at 62. I had him at 76 overall. Not really sure what he exactly is going to do. I think he's going to be a right tackle. Reminds me a lot of the TJ Clemmings kid they took a couple years ago, but I think he's a bit better of a player. 76 on my board. Gave it a B+. Not in love with the pick, but just kind of don't hate it either. Pick I'm not really fond of at 102. Jalen Holmes, the rotational defensive end out of Ohio State. I had him at 240 on my board, and you got him at 102. This was not great value. I gave it a C-. Just really thought that there were a lot better edge rushers available. Next up, Tyler Conklin, the tight end out of Central Michigan. This was my first priority UDFA player, but again, fits a need as far as having a backup tight end behind Kyle Rudolph, who is also getting up there in age too. I didn't realize, Kyle Rudolph's already like 30, 31 years old. So Tyler Conklin kind of reminds me a little bit of Rudolph, which means that it's a great fit, and I think he can learn quite a bit coming up behind Rudolph. I actually gave this a B-, despite the value in my mind being a little bit off. Daniel Carson, the kicker out of Auburn. Again, I don't scout kickers, but this guy was the consensus number 1 kicker. So I gave it an I gave it an A. It's an obvious need. Kai Forbath was their kicker last year, who isn't that good. Kind of an inaccurate kicker. You get the best kicker in the class. Gave it an A. Colby Gossett, a guard out of Appalachian State, at 213, wasn't on my board. Gave it a C. Ade Aruna at 218, he's 258 on my board. Gave it a B+. Kind of a rotational defensive end. Was productive, but it was at Tulane, so it's kind of hard to judge. Decent player. Wasn't sure if didn't have him as a draftable player. But you know what? It's late, and this was a kind of a weird draft once you get into round 5, 6, and 7. A lot of guys that I had as undrafted or I hadn't heard of were being picked over guys that I had, kind of those day 3 grades on. And then Devontae Downs, a linebacker out of California, kind of like with James Looney, didn't think California had any draft prospects coming up. Wasn't someone I had my eye on, wasn't on my board, gave it a C. Overall, gave Minnesota a B draft. The whole NFC North, they just kind of did pretty good on their drafts. None of them really blew it out of the water, but they all got solid players in a really tough division. That's going to do it for today, guys. Tune in tomorrow when we do the AFC and NFC South. As always, guys, like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, tell another friend, and I'll see you tomorrow.